I cheated on my husband with the neighbor. My lover's wife caught us in the act. I was kicked out of the house, and I lost everything for a few moments of pleasure. I am Fernanda, 30 years old, and I have been a housewife for almost a decade. Before that, I worked at a travel agency, but I gave everything up to dedicate myself full-time to my family. Franco, my husband, is 36 years old, and he is a civil engineer. He has always been that kind of man who seems to have come straight out of a dream, responsible, funny, dedicated to his family. We have 2 children, 8 and 10 years old, who are the perfect copy of their father in every way. Our life has always been peaceful, without great luxuries, but full of love and stability. At least, that is what I believed. We moved to a small, cozy neighborhood where everyone knows each other and helps one another. The children run through the streets, the mothers gather to chat on the sidewalks, the fathers have barbecues on weekends. I was happy there. It was easy to feel that my life was complete, that I was missing absolutely nothing. Franco had a secure job, our bills were up to date, our children were healthy and full of life. I used to look at our house, the garden that I took care of with my own hands, and think that I had won the lottery of life. Franco was my safe haven, my best friend, my lover. We met when I was 22 and he was 28, and we got married 2 years later. He was always patient with me, even in my most difficult phases. He taught me to trust, to lay down the weapons I had from past relationships. For a long time, I felt like the most loved woman in the world. There was not a single moment when I doubted his loyalty and affection for me, and that is exactly what makes everything even harder to accept today. Over the years, my routine became an exhausting repetition, waking up, cleaning the house, taking care of the children, preparing dinner, going to sleep. I did not realize it, but a silent hole was growing inside me, an emptiness that I did not know how to name. Franco, although wonderful, did not realize that I was beginning to feel invisible. I would never have had the courage to admit it at that time, because it seemed ungrateful to me. After all, how many women would give anything to have what I had? Still, there was a restlessness, a thirst for something that I did not even know what it was. The first time I felt that something was wrong was when I started to fantasize about other possibilities, small things, a compliment from a stranger at the supermarket, a prolonged look from a neighbor. I was ashamed of these thoughts. I tried to push them away as if they were insistent flies, but deep down, it lit something inside me that I thought had died. I was desired, I was seen, and this, although small, began to grow like a weed in the middle of my perfect garden. Now I look back and see how everything started so innocently and silently. It was never a conscious choice, it was never a plan. It was just a succession of small emotional slips, a series of oversights that together opened a huge gap in the wall I had built around my marriage. I still loved Franco with all my soul, but it was as if a forgotten part of me was screaming for attention. And it was that scream that, without realizing it, led me to make the biggest mistake of my life. The beginning of everything was the arrival of a new couple in the neighborhood. Diego and Mariana were younger than most of our neighbors, beautiful, full of energy, and seemed to fit in perfectly anywhere. Diego was 28 years old, he was a real estate agent, and Mariana worked at a clinic as a dental assistant. From the first time I saw them, I felt something strange, a discomfort that I could not explain. It was as if, unintentionally, I knew that they would bring something that would change my life. Curiosity mixed with nervousness was the first spark. The day we really met was at a barbecue organized by one of the neighbors. Most of them were much older, so Diego and Mariana naturally gravitated towards Franco and me. It was easy to talk to them, there was a lightness that made everything seem more fun. Diego was charismatic, with an easy smile and a way of speaking that made any woman feel special. When our eyes met for the first time, I felt butterflies in my stomach that I had not felt in years, and at that moment, I ignored the warning that flashed inside me. Franco and Diego soon started to get along well. They both liked sports, barbecues, cars. It was common to see them laughing and talking at neighborhood gatherings. Franco, without knowing it, opened the doors even more for Diego to enter our lives. In a way, This made me feel at ease, because Diego was a family friend and not a stranger. But with each new encounter, each exchanged joke, each sideways glance, that silent tension grew between him and me. And instead of pushing him away, I let it feed me. At first, I thought it was just in my head, that I was needy and that he probably did not even think about it. But Diego made sure to be present when Franco was not looking, subtle touches on the arm, compliments disguised in the middle of conversations, inside jokes that only the two of us understood. It seemed harmless, even fun, and that was exactly what made everything so dangerous. It started as an innocent joke and turned into something I no longer knew how to control. I felt alive again. It was not about Diego or love or true passion. It was about being desired, about feeling special in a world where I was simply Franco's wife or the children's mother. Diego saw something in me that I had already forgotten existed, and although I knew it was wrong, I let that feeling take over me. I wanted that feeling, that electricity that I had not experienced in a long time, even if it was at the cost of the only thing that really mattered in my life. Now looking back, I realize how quickly everything happened, how the line between innocent and unforgivable was crossed without me realizing it. No one wakes up one day and decides to destroy their own life. Things happen in small, almost invisible doses until you suddenly find yourself in the middle of something you never imagined. And that is how temptation entered my home, my heart, and changed everything. And I, blinded by adrenaline, let it happen. The casual encounters between Diego and me began to become inevitable. At first, it was just in front of everyone at neighborhood parties, always with Franco nearby. But little by little, life created excuses for us to get closer. Diego, as a real estate agent, was always involved with houses for sale in the region. One day, he told Franco that he had received the key to an empty house and invited us to visit it. Franco could not go that day for work reasons and, without thinking much about it, I accepted the invitation to see the property. On the way, my heart was beating in a strange way, as if it felt that it was not just about walls and windows. When we arrived, Diego opened the door and suddenly the air felt heavy. He walked by my side, describing the rooms, but I could barely hear him. The smell of fresh paint, the soft light coming through the windows, everything seemed prepared for a forbidden movie set. When we went up to see the rooms, he looked at me in a way that I could no longer interpret as innocent, and I did not look away. I could have taken a step back, I could have said no, I could have remembered my family, my children, the life we had built. But the truth is that I no longer wanted to run away. When Diego came closer, pinning me against the wall of an empty room, I did nothing to stop him. Our first kiss happened there, silent, urgent, full of months of repressed tension. My knees were trembling. When we separated, we stared at each other, not knowing what to say. I knew that from that moment on, things would never be the same again. I tried to convince myself that it had been an isolated mistake, that it would not happen again. I made up an excuse to Franco, saying that the property was too small and that it was not worth it. At night, I would lie next to him, feeling dirty, guilty, and sick of myself. Franco, as always, hugged me and kissed my forehead before going to sleep. I turned away, too ashamed to face the pure love he still felt for me. I was beginning to understand that betrayal not only destroys the betrayed, it corrodes those who betray from the inside out. After that day, the messages between Diego and me changed. It was no longer just about jokes or casual conversations. Now it was a secret language full of silent promises. We arranged quick meetings at crazy times, using absurd excuses that, to my shame, Franco accepted without question. Each small encounter was like a drug that numbed me from the guilt, but destroyed me a little more each time it ended. I was trapped, addicted to the adrenaline and the risk, unable to turn back. It did not take long for our encounters to stop being just stolen kisses. Under the pretext of seeing more houses, Diego arranged visits to empty properties where no one was waiting for us. Every time I walked through the door with him, I left another piece of the Fernanda that Franco loved. I knew this could only end in two ways, with painful regret or with the complete destruction of my life. And yet I continued, as if I had no other choice, as if it were already too late to stop. The encounters with Diego became more frequent and dangerous. It was no longer just about empty properties. Sometimes we would meet in remote parking lots, in cheap hotels in neighboring cities, at times carefully chosen to avoid suspicion. I made up ridiculous excuses to Franco, fictitious courses, school meetings, helping friends who did not even exist. Each lie was like a brick in the wall I was building between myself and the life I was supposed to protect. And the more I lied, the more I distanced myself from everything real. What I felt for Diego was not love, it was not even real affection. It was pure instinct, a pure hunger to be desired, seen, touched. When we were together, it was as if the whole world disappeared, as if the consequences were tomorrow's Fernanda's problem. But even in the most intense moments, even with the adrenaline pumping, there was a voice in the back of my mind that screamed that this was wrong, that I was throwing everything away. I ignored it. I suffocated that voice with kisses and empty promises that we never said out loud. Comparing Diego to Franco was like comparing fire to water. Franco was stability, patience, unconditional love. Diego was chaos, urgency, and irresponsibility. It was obvious to me, even at the height of his madness, that Franco was infinitely better in every way. The cruel irony is that although I recognized it, I chose day after day to lose myself in Diego. It was as if I had become another person, a woman I never imagined capable of existing. And yet, here I was, betraying the man who least deserved it. Over time, the fear began to grow. I had constant nightmares in which Franco caught us, in which my children looked at me with disappointment. I started to become paranoid, even suspicious of my own shadow. Every time Franco hugged me, I stiffened, scared by the weight of the guilt that seemed to overflow from my body. But not even this fear, not even this permanent anguish, stopped me from continuing. I always found an excuse to justify it. Just one more time, I will stop later, he will never find out. Pure illusion. I remember one particular day when Franco prepared a special dinner at home, just for the two of us, while our children were sleeping. He had prepared my favorite dish and decorated the table with flowers. When I sat down to eat, I could barely swallow the food from so much shame. I looked him in the eyes and saw so much love, so much trust, that I wanted to scream, to tell him everything and ask for his forgiveness right there. But I kept quiet, like a coward, and I smiled at him. That night is etched in me as one of the most painful memories of my life. The truth is that deep down, I knew it could not last. It was a matter of time before everything fell apart. I felt it in every nervous glance, in every cursed excuse, in every small detail that one day could have given me away. But even though I knew the end would be catastrophic, I continued, because a part of me, the most selfish and broken part, thought that I deserved to experience that danger, that escape from reality, even if it was for a few more moments. I threw myself into the abyss with my eyes open, aware of everything I was destroying. The fall did not come with subtlety, it came like an earthquake, destroying everything in a matter of seconds. It was any other morning, one of those mornings when everything seemed normal. Diego and I had arranged to meet at an empty house that he was showing to a fictitious client. I thought that since it was a weekday, no one would suspect. Everything was planned to be quick and safe. But what I could never have predicted is that Mariana, Diego's wife, had been suspicious for weeks, and that day she decided to follow us. We were in the back room and I was straddling Diego, riding him hard, moaning loudly and screaming his name while he slapped my buttocks, inciting my delirium even more. We were so lost in that moment of pure lust that we did not hear the door being kicked down. Mariana came in like a hurricane, screaming, crying, cursing us both. In the same second, I felt the ground disappear from under my feet. Seeing Mariana's betrayed, destroyed face was like looking at what would one day be Franco's face. I managed to break free, picking up my clothes from the floor while Mariana continued to scream. I ran barefoot to the car, my heart beating so fast that I could barely breathe. Inside the car, trembling, I cried like I had never cried in my life. The reality of what I had done hit me brutally and mercilessly. It was no longer a secret affair or a passionate game. It was real and palpable destruction that I had caused myself. And I knew that was just the beginning. I arrived home dirty, disheveled, with my face stained with tears. I locked myself in the bathroom and stayed there for hours, looking at my reflection, trying to understand how I had let everything get to that point. I thought of my children, I thought of Franco, I thought of the life that was now crumbling before my eyes. I knew I needed to tell the truth before it reached someone else, but the mere idea of seeing the disappointment in Franco's eyes paralyzed me. I felt like a criminal awaiting sentencing. That same afternoon, before I had the courage to say anything, the worst happened. Mariana and her mother appeared at our door, screaming, banging on the windows, shouting my name for the whole neighborhood to hear. I hid in the hallway, curled up, feeling the weight of shame crush my bones. Luckily, my children were at school, without witnessing that grotesque scene. When the silence finally returned, I knew I had no other choice. Franco would find out anyway, and I needed to prepare myself to lose everything. Franco arrived home early in the afternoon from work. I saw him from the window, walking slowly, as if he were carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. When he entered, I tried to approach him, trying to find the strength to speak, but he raised his hand as if ordering a stranger to stop in the street. Without a word, he turned around and left again, walking towards Diego and Mariana's house. And it was at that moment, seeing the back of the man I loved most walk away, that I knew I had destroyed the only truly good thing I had. When Franco returned home hours later, he was no longer the same man. His eyes, once full of tenderness, were as cold as stone. I tried to hug him, I tried to take his hands, but he pulled away, as if my touch burned his skin. I began to cry, to murmur apologies and to ask for forgiveness, but he just looked at me without anger, without shouting, just a heartbreaking emptiness. His indifference was 1,000 times worse than any cry of hatred. At that moment, I understood. I had killed his love for me. Franco asked me to leave the house that same night. There was no room for discussion or desperate pleas. He had already called my mother, who arrived shortly after to pick me up. As I randomly packed clothes into a suitcase, I felt Franco's empty gaze piercing through my back. Every step I took was a sentence. Every object I left behind seemed to carry the weight of all our years together. Leaving through the door of our house was like crossing a portal into an endless nightmare. My mother did not ask questions. She simply hugged me tightly while I cried in the passenger seat. The shame was so great that I could barely breathe. I spent that night in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how I, who had everything, could get rid of the best man I had ever known. I called Franco more than 20 times that morning. When he finally answered, his voice was cold and distant. I begged, I pleaded, I promised to change, I promised everything, but he simply said, I do not want to hear it. The following days were a mixture of desperation and humiliation. Franco allowed me to talk to the children on the phone, but he made it clear that for now they were unaware of the reason for the separation. With each call, I pretended to be strong, talking about school, drawings, trivialities, while inside I was dying a little more. I knew that Franco was simply protecting our children from the horror that was the truth, and deep down, I also knew that when they found out, they would never look at me the same way. Not knowing what to do, I proposed a postnuptial agreement to Franco, giving him everything he wanted. I went from lawyer to lawyer until I managed to draft a contract in which I renounced practically all of our assets, just in exchange for a second chance. I wanted to show that I would make any sacrifice to try to regain his respect. Franco agreed to read the document, but he set very harsh conditions: no obligation of intimate cohabitation, freedom to go out with whomever he wanted, and a minimum period of cohabitation only for the children. I signed the agreement without hesitation, humiliated, shattered, but still desperately hopeful. I returned home a few days later, but nothing was the same anymore. Franco avoided any physical contact. He would not look me in the eye. He did not respond to caresses or words of affection. I was just a shadow, a presence tolerated out of obligation. We shared the same roof, we took care of the same children, but we were like strangers living in parallel worlds. And every minute in that house was a living reminder of what I had lost forever. Life after signing the agreement seemed like a silent punishment. Franco and I became housemates, united only by the need to raise our children. There were no more kisses, hugs, not even accidental touches. Each one lived in their corner, pretending to be normal, which only fooled those who wanted to believe. We slept in separate rooms. I heard his footsteps around the house, the clinking of cutlery during dinner with the children, and I felt like an unwanted stranger in my own family. It was unbearably painful. The rules between us were clear, even without saying them. No affection, no intimacy, no conversations about feelings. Everything was practical, objective, as if we had a business contract. I did my best to cook, clean the house, do everything as best I could, hoping that maybe, with time, Franco would soften. But the cold looks, the physical distance, and the rigidity in his posture made it clear. His love for me was dead, and perhaps all that was left was a vague sense of family responsibility. My social life was also completely destroyed. The women in the neighborhood, once my friends, turned their backs on me. The news of the betrayal spread like wildfire, each detail more distorted than the last. No one wanted to be seen talking to me. I became the object of whispers and sideways glances. Every time I went to the market or the children's school, I felt that people were judging me, condemning me with their eyes. It was an imposed social exile for which I myself was responsible. And yet, it hurt me more than I could have ever imagined. Diego and Mariana could not withstand the storm either. They separated a few months after the discovery. Mariana stayed in the house with her children while Diego simply disappeared. A part of me felt a bitter hatred towards him. After all, he moved on, free, while I was trapped in the ruins we helped build. But in reality, it was all my fault. I was the one who betrayed Franco. I was the one who destroyed our lives. There was no possible escape from this fact. And facing this reality every day was my real punishment. From time to time, I tried to get closer to Franco. I tried to start a conversation, suggest family outings, revive some happy memory. But he remained polite, cold, and impassive. His eyes no longer shone for me. I was just the mother of his children, nothing more. Each failed attempt at reconnection was like a new stab in my chest. I realized that forgiveness, if it ever came, would not be easy or quick. Maybe it would not even be possible. I was paying a huge price for my mistake, and every day in that house was a living reminder of it. Loneliness became my only constant companion. Even surrounded by the voices of my children, the household chores, and the noises of the neighborhood, I felt isolated in an invisible bubble of sadness. I took refuge in small hobbies, gardening, reading, solitary walks around the block. It was as if I were trying to fill the void I had created, but no activity, no effort could erase the latent pain of knowing that Franco would never be mine again. And that maybe I would never forgive myself either. As the months passed, the house became a cemetery of silence and empty looks. I knew I had to do something, anything, to try to recover even a fraction of what we had lost. I proposed to Franco that we go to couples therapy. I suggested short trips. I even tried small gestures like preparing his favorite dishes or leaving discreet notes around the house. Each attempt was met with polite indifference. It was like throwing stones into a bottomless pit. I tried with all my might to build bridges, but he would not even look at them. It was in this desperation that I decided to temporarily move to a small rented apartment. I thought that maybe by giving me space, Franco might miss me or at least rethink the future. I rented a simple place near home to be close to the kids. During the move, Franco showed no emotion. No requests for me to stay, no sad looks, just the cold silence that was already a custom between us. Leaving home again, this time without drama, was even more devastating. In the apartment, I began to create a routine with the kids, simple dinners, movies on Friday nights, walks in the park. For brief moments, I could forget the tragedy that my life had become. Franco allowed them to spend some nights with me, and on those days I felt a little less alone. Still, his absence was a constant ghost at every meal, at every forced laugh. I knew that although I was trying to rebuild some happiness for my children, there was a part of me that would never heal. From time to time, Franco would call me to discuss practical matters, school, doctor's appointments, extracurricular activities. I always tried to prolong the conversation, to bring up some personal topic, but he remained cold and distant. In a few moments, he seemed to waver, showing a glimpse of longing, but he quickly returned to his cold mode. Each call ended with the bitter feeling of a frustrated hope. It was a cruel cycle. I was encouraged by crumbs of attention only to be thrown back into the void. I proposed that we try to start over for real. I proposed a new house, a different life, away from the memories of the neighborhood. Franco refused. He said he would only change if a professional opportunity forced him to, but that he would voluntarily never leave. The neighborhood was the last thing that still gave the children a semblance of stability, and he would not give that up. That was a hard blow to my hope. I realized that for Franco, our story was already over. What was left was just a cold collaboration supported by the children. Still, I kept trying, no matter how humiliating it was. I accepted all the conditions he imposed, all the rules. I tolerated the contempt, the indifference, the absence of affection. I clung to the small illusion that with time I could recover at least part of his love. But deep down, I already knew it. Some betrayals are so deep that they leave no room for reconciliation. And in the silence of my empty apartment, I began to understand that maybe the only thing left for me was to accept the loss. The divorce was an inevitable decision. Franco called me to talk one rainy afternoon. Sitting in the same room where we had dreamed together so many times, his voice was calm, almost sad, but determined. He said that he loved me in a way, but that he could no longer see me as a wife. For him, remaining married would be prolonging unnecessary suffering for us and our children. I listened to everything in silence, with a tight chest, without having the strength to argue. Deep down, I already knew it was the end. I agreed to sign the papers without questioning anything. I did not try to fight for properties, pensions, or anything. I knew that everything Franco had built was the result of his effort, and that I had no right to take it away from him after what I did. I gave him everything I could, as a last attempt to show him the love I still felt. It was strange, painful, almost surreal to sign those papers. Each signature was like a stab, sealing the end of the story I dreamed would last forever. Curiously, Franco suggested that we celebrate the end of the marriage in a symbolic way, a dinner, maybe a night to say goodbye not as enemies, but as two people who once loved each other deeply. I accepted, somewhat stunned. That night we met at a discreet restaurant. We laughed at old memories, we cried together without shame. It was as if for a brief moment we were ourselves again, before the pain, before the betrayal, before the abyss that separated us. Franco was clear about it. He did not want to get married again, neither with me nor with anyone else. He believed that true love did not need contracts to exist. He said that maybe in the future we could try something without pressure, just two human beings reconnecting. I wanted to believe that, although I knew it was a fragile hope. I clung to this vague promise like someone clinging to a board in the sea. It was better than his total absence in my life, I thought. It was not much, but it was all I could have. Today I live in a simple but cozy apartment. I work part-time at a plant store, and I spend my afternoons taking care of a garden I started from scratch. Franco and I are in constant contact, thanks to the kids. Sometimes we even have coffee together in silence, like old friends too hurt to try anything more. I know we will never be what we were again, and, despite the sadness, I have learned to accept it. Not all stories have a happy ending, but they all have lessons, even the most painful ones. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone like me who feels the emptiness of temptation growing inside their chest, it would be run. Run, scream, do anything but cross that line. The forbidden thrill lasts for seconds, but the pain of loss is eternal. I destroyed my family through moments of selfishness that were not even as good as they seemed in fantasy. Now all I have left is to carry this weight, one day at a time, trying to become someone whom Franco can at least respect again someday.